There are punishments that end a life in seconds, and then there are punishments designed to leave the body alive, while everything that once made life recognizable is stripped away. Across history, complete genital removal was considered one of the most absolute penalties a state could impose short of execution. It was not meant to kill quickly. It was meant to erase identity, lineage, sexuality, and social power in a single act. Survivors often described it as death without dying. To understand why, we need to look at what happened during the punishment and what followed afterward, long after the crowd had gone home. Why castration was considered worse than death. In many pre-modern societies, masculinity was tied to three things: reproduction, inheritance, and authority. Removing the genitals destroyed all three. A man who survived complete castration could no longer father children, pass on a family line, or fulfill expected social roles. In legal terms, he became a social null, alive, but excluded from normal life. This is why castration was often reserved for political traitors, palace conspirators, sexual crimes, real or alleged, enslaved populations, court rivals, religious or imperial punishments meant to humiliate, not just punish. Unlike execution, castration sent a living message. What happened? During the punishment, historical records from Byzantine law codes, Chinese imperial archives, Ottoman court documents, and medieval European chronicles agree on one thing: speed mattered less than symbolism. The act was usually performed in a controlled public or semi-public setting by state-appointed officials or surgeons, without anesthesia. As we understand it today, the goal was total removal, not symbolic injury. Survival depended entirely on the skill of the person performing it, immediate control of blood loss, crude wound treatment afterward. Many victims did not survive the first days. Infection was common, shock was common, but survival was possible. Historical records indicate that the removed part was usually discarded after officials confirmed the punishment. In some imperial systems, it was briefly retained as proof, but there is no credible evidence it was used for ritual, medical, or symbolic purposes. And when it happened, the punishment truly began. Because death was not the objective, those who lived through the procedure entered a dangerous recovery period. Historical medical texts describe extreme weakness, inability to stand or walk for extended periods, chronic pain or complications, long recovery times under poor conditions. Survivors were often deliberately denied comfort. In some systems, recovery was just enough to keep the person alive, but not enough to restore dignity. In many cultures, survival itself was viewed as proof that the punishment had worked. Permanent physical consequences. Even without graphic detail, the long-term effects are clear in historical sources. Hormonal collapse leading to loss of muscle mass and strength. Changes in voice and body composition over time. Chronic health problems, reduced stamina, and physical resilience. In societies where physical labor or military service defined manhood, this alone ensured permanent marginalization. But the physical damage was only part of the sentence. Life after castration. Here is where death without dying becomes painfully literal. In many cultures, castrated men could not marry, could not legally inherit property, could not testify in court, could not hold certain offices, were barred from religious or civic leadership. They were alive, but legally diminished. Some societies forced castrated individuals into specific social roles: palace servants or guards, court officials without dynastic power, religious or administrative positions requiring obedience. In Imperial China, castration was the price of entering the inner court. Eunuchs could gain influence, but at the cost of irreversible bodily loss. Even then, they were distrusted and often despised. In Europe and the Middle East, castration usually meant social exile, poverty, or lifelong stigma. No historical source describes castration as anything less than psychologically devastating. Chroniclers note withdrawal, loss of identity, shame imposed by society, public ridicule, lifelong humiliation. The punishment worked because it wasn't hidden. People knew, communities knew. The body itself became evidence of state power. Unlike imprisonment, there was no release date. Why states chose castration? Over-execution ends resistance. Castration prevents legacy. Rulers used it strategically to neutralize rivals without martyrdom, to humiliate enemies publicly, to control palace populations, to punish sexual or political crimes permanently. A dead man could inspire rebellion. A broken survivor served as a warning. This is why castration appears repeatedly across empires that never interacted with each other. Different cultures, same logic. Historical examples of living death. Byzantine Empire. Castration used to remove political threats while avoiding blood guilt. Imperial China. Required for palace service. Survival created loyal but trapped servants. Ottoman Empire. Used within court hierarchies and slavery systems. Medieval Europe. Applied in extreme criminal cases, often followed by exile. In every case, the punishment extended far beyond the day it was carried out. The final truth. Execution ends a body. Castration ended a future. It removed lineage, sexuality, social standing, and identity, while forcing the person to live with the consequences in full view of society. That is why many historical sources describe it as worse than death. And that is why it terrifies historians even now, because it reminds us that punishment was once designed not to correct behavior, but to erase a human being while keeping them alive. History doesn't just show us what happened, it shows us what people once believed was acceptable. If this story challenged how you think about punishment and power, share your thoughts below. And if you want more history that explores the darker truths behind justice, authority, and control, consider subscribing, because some punishments were never meant to end.